بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا، وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. أسأل الله تبارك وتعالى أن يجعل نياتنا خالصة لوجهه الكريم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. We've been talking about the primary sources of Islamic knowledge. And we talked about the Quran, and we talked about as-Sunnah, or the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we emphasized the importance of having an attachment to the Quran and an attachment to the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then we talked about the scholarly consensus, al-ijma'. And there are methodologies by which we learn Islam that has an agreement among the nation of Sayyiduna Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There is something that we should think about as Muslims, and there are traces from misguided ideologies within Islam that have reached us, unfortunately, many of us, which has intervened in our proper way of learning the religion. And I don't say it's our fault, but it is something that has occurred. And it is a major problem, especially in our communities. We've been exposed to misguided groups that have given us an approach to understanding our religion that wasn't the traditional approach, or is not the traditional approach. So there's been various groups that we've confronted in our effort to learn about Islam, and all of those groups had an effect on how we understand the deen. I listened yesterday to the 3-5-3-4-5-3 show of the youth, and they were talking about African American unity. And then I noticed the conversation got shift. And as I was listening, I didn't say anything because I wanted really to allow the youth to run their show without our interference, right? Because the show about the youth is to get their understanding, how they see things. But I realized something from listening to their discussion is that they have been affected too in their understandings. So they don't, as a general rule, they're learning, and may Allah reward them and increase them. But they don't have a firm understanding. And many of the adults don't have an understanding at all in these matters and don't realize how much we've been affected by deviant ideas. Though we don't rush to call someone a disbeliever, there is a such thing as disbelief. I want you to put that up. Even though we don't rush to call someone, meaning someone who claims to be a Muslim, as a disbeliever, there is a such thing as disbelief. And we should be very careful with calling something that is disbelief Islam. This is where it gets sticky, right? So not every idea that comes in the name of Islam is truly Islam. Some things are not permissible to believe. Some things are not permissible to say. And some things are not permissible to do. And this is by the consensus of this nation. How do we know that? How do we know these things? That is another source of Islamic knowledge, which is having recourse to the works of our traditional Islamic scholars, where unfortunately our access is very limited in that regard, unfortunately. And most of the information we're getting today comes from the route of deviant groups that by far have been rejected by the vast majority of the Muslim nation. This is just a reality that we're facing, right? So we have to start learning how to learn. And the biggest, for us, the biggest support in that is learning history. For us, one of the biggest supports in learning our Islam correctly is to learn history. History is an excellent teacher. History is an excellent teacher. Because through history, and I told you this before, when you study historically and globally, you're going to get a better picture of what Islam is and what it was in the past. When you start to learn about historic figures in the religion, scholars, learned people in different fields, is going to give you a better outlook into your present day situation. So we have some basic things that all of us should know, must know. And I say should, I mean it's obligatory for you to know. Uh, you need to know the correct belief in Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. And it is not a belief that you can be in doubt about. It's not something you can say, it may be this way, it may be that way. And you have to distinguish between the matters that are like that. This is the book that you, excuse me. Someone asked me about this book. Give me 1 second, I'm sorry. And here's the link. That's the book we're going to be studying in next week, inshallah. Everyone should have the book by next week. So I lost my thought for a minute. Let me take that down. Take that down, please. So when you do this historic study, globally and historically, you start to learn about scholars. Then you're going to see patterns. It's available in the UK. You don't have to come all the way from here, from America. Khalid, you can get it in the UK. Shaquille. It's going to help you in terms of knowing what Muslims are supposed to believe. So you got these basic beliefs, correct belief in Allah, and then the acts of ibadat, prayer, fasting, hajj, zakat. These are basic things that every Muslim knows about, that they are part of the religion. And all at that point, once you know about them, you just have to learn the how to do them properly. But what we need to have is access to Islamic scholarship, past, and I say past so we can understand the present, because there are so many groups today, so many, with different ideas, so many individuals, especially with the internet. Everyone is selling their goods. Everyone is selling their goods. The marketplace is full with somebody selling goods, Islamic understanding and knowledge. It's filled up. So to sort through all of that, you need to have a framework by which you work under, right? And that framework should be our tradition that has been passed down from generation to generation to generation. And in general, that has not changed. Sometimes it may be hard to detect, but it hasn't changed. In other words, our religion and our religious texts that have been accepted have basically stood the test of time, right? And that's something unique about Islam, that our religious structure remains intact, despite all these different groups and ideologies that exist. It has remained intact. So I advise you, as I told you before, because it's important if we think about it. You're going to need reliable books and trustworthy teachers. Reliable books and trustworthy teachers. And you're going to have to follow the methodology of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. If you stick to that practice, inshallah tabaraka wa ta'ala, your journey in learning and practice Islam will be safe. Right? Don't listen to no one today except you weigh them by the scales of the scholars of the past. Many of you may not be aware of this, that the scholars of today, in terms of knowledge, piety, practice, do not compare to the scholars of the past. And if there are scholars today or learned people today that can compare, you can count them on your fingers. So that gives you a level playing field when you learn that. And the one who doesn't understand this has not learned about true Islamic scholarship. The one who would disagree with this has never learned true Islamic scholarship. So that would help you not get overwhelmed by popularity or some charismatic speaker or some influential leader. You won't get caught up in all that. When you put them in the scale of classical Islamic scholarship, that doesn't mean you're going to put them down. It just will make you realize that this nation of Sayyiduna Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has had amazing scholars, practitioners, worshipers, spiritual masters. Amazing, right? And we have them as a scale to weigh what we're confronted with, right? That's for all of us. It's a protection, really. And all we have to do is get access to that. All we have to do is get access to that scholarship. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said about this nation that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala would never allow his nation to agree on misguidance. So whenever you see differences, then follow the majority of this nation. And he said in another narration, the protection of Allah is on the majority of the nation. And whoever deviates from that, deviates to the hellfire. And there has been a complete agreement of the nation of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the majority of the nation, on following the structure and the schools of thought of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, which are in the Creed, the Ash'aris and Maturidis, which are in Al-Fiqh, in the rules of the religion, the Hanafis, the Malikis, the Shafi'is, the Hanbalis, and in spirituality, the Sufi paths. That has been accepted. Since the time of the Salaf, the early Muslims, to our day today. And in every century, in every place where Muslims exist, they had scholars in each of those fields. So at no point did Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala leave this nation misguided. There is always reference points all over the world in every time. So I think this is just very important for us to understand and to reflect upon it. And then when you get into learning each of these methodologies, there's vast amounts of knowledge to learn and to discover. And we have to take it in stages because it's a lot of information. Step by step by step. And then admit, and we got to make it fashionable among us to admit when we don't know. That has to become a badge of honor, saying I don't know in its proper place. We don't have to answer everything. And please, in your practice, don't push people to answer everything. If someone doesn't know, let them say, I don't know. Then we can go look. We can go research. We can go find out. Don't push people to speak about matters they don't fully understand. Right? Get in the habit, if you really, really haven't researched well and you really don't know, to say, I don't know. It got to become a habit among us. It's going to be a protection for us. It's okay. It's not sinful to say, I don't know. It was related from one of the companions, I think it was Abdullah ibn Umar, radiallahu ta'ala anhuma. He said, O ye people, whoever knows a thing, let him speak by it. And whoever does not know a thing, let him say, Allah knows best. Because verily it is a part of knowledge to say to a thing that you don't know, Allah knows best. It is a part of knowledge to say to a thing that you don't know, I don't know. It's part of the religious practice. I don't know. One time someone came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and they asked him, what are the best and worst places? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, I don't know. I will ask Jibril. And when Jibril came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he asked Sayyidina Jibril alayhi salam, which are the best and the worst of places? And Jibril said, I don't know, I will ask my Lord. And Allah revealed to Sayyidina Jibril alayhi salam that the best of places are the masajid, are the masjids, and the worst of places are the marketplaces. So we know the best place to be are the masjids, and the worst to be at the marketplace, the mall, the store. But how did we get that information? By the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying, I don't know, and by Jibril saying, I don't know. So if the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam can say, I don't know, and Jibril, the one who brought revelation, can say, I don't know, what about us? Should we be shy? Should we feel bad to say, I don't know? Sayyidina Imam Malik radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who was known as the Imam of Al-Madinah, right? In his time, in the second century Hijrah, Imam Malik was the Imam of Al-Madinah. And anyone who would come to Al-Madinah would come to learn and sit with Imam Malik ibn Anas radiallahu ta'ala anhu. One time a person came to him and he had like 46 questions, somewhere around there. Imam Malik answered like 6 of them, and to the rest of them, he said, I don't know. Imam Dar al-Hijrah. He is the Imam in the Prophet's Mosque, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in his time. And when he was questioned, he said, I don't know, to most of the questions. And the person said to him, I traveled a long distance to ask you these questions. And my people back in my town, they're waiting for these answers. What I'm going to tell them? And Sayyidina Imam Malik said, tell them. Malik said, I don't know. Tell them. Malik said, I don't know. He wasn't shy. And he was a mujtahid scholar, top level scholar, absolute scholar in religious jurisprudence, Islamic jurisprudence. But he wasn't shy to say, I don't know. So what about us common people? Some things we just don't know. I remember one of my teachers telling me about saying, I don't know. He said, never be shy to say, I don't know. Because if you say you don't know in its proper place, you will protect yourself and the questioner. You'll protect yourself from the sin of speaking without knowledge. And you'll protect the listener from being misguided, because maybe the listener trusts you and will only ask you and no one else. And thereby, they could be misguided. So for your side, you should never be shy to say, I don't know in its proper place. And that is a very important lesson that all of us in our journey to learn Islam need to keep at the forefront of our mind. Because some of these movements have made us to the point that we're experts without any training. We've become like experts without any training, which means we're not experts. It's delusion in our minds that Islam is a do it yourself religion and I could just do it any way I want. And that's not reality. There is a system, there is a structure, there is a way to do things. And it's not rigid. Let me keep that in your mind. It's not rigid. The more you learn, you'll understand that Islam is vast. I'm talking about correct understanding of Islam is vast. There are some agreed upon principles, and then there are other things that relates to sound methodology. And different scholars adopt different methodologies to approach different situations. But it's vast, it's not rigid. Just within the four schools, the Hanafi school, the Maliki school, the Shafi'i school, the Hanbali school, is a wide range of understanding of religious matters. And we're talking about in terms of the practical aspects of the religion. A wide range of approaches to different legal questions of how to live and practice as a Muslim. Within that body of agreement. So even when we learn, we should keep that in mind. Because I follow the Shafi'i school, that doesn't mean all of the answers of Islam are within that individual school, right? Or in the Hanafi school or in the Maliki school. There are different approaches among the scholars within a single school, let alone other schools. Within a single school. And there are, I should put this for you, strict rulings and dispensations in every school. What does that mean? That means that you're going to have, in the range of Islamic scholarship, you're going to have strict ruling, which is usually the most safe ruling in the school in a particular case. Then you're going to have dispensations, which are easier rulings when the strict rulings are not possible. You have that within one school. And then you have that outside of the school, so the scope widens, right? So that means that you're not restricted even within a school because your circumstances are always going to be taken into consideration. And that's a mercy. It's very important to understand these things. One of the great scholars his name was Abdul Wahab al-Sha'rani. He wrote an entire book on this subject, Between the Four Schools. And he showed how all of these trace back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that he said something that I found was profound. That we always look to follow the strict rulings in the religion because that is more precautionary in the religion, to follow the strict ruling, right? We don't look for dispensations in general. We want to follow the strongest opinion within a school and the strictest ruling for safety in our religion. But he mentioned the fact that for the one who cannot do the strict ruling, cannot perform the strict ruling, the dispensation in relation to that person is the strict ruling. That's phenomenal. That's like, wow. For such a person, the dispensation is the strict ruling. And it is perfectly fine for that person. Are y'all following this? I'm working hard on getting us to understand so that we can learn, right? A lot of times it's difficult to teach us because we think we already know. It's hard. So we have to try to get us in a state that we can learn. So keep this aspect of learning. This is a good question. I love this question. It does. All this, what I'm talking about, it applies to our situation in the United States. But what we're missing, and I'm speaking specifically African Americans. It angers me too when I think about it. I shouldn't get angry, but I do. And the older I get, it seems like the angrier I get. Because I begin to think this stuff is a conspiracy. Seriously, man. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Uh, we need African American scholarship, real African American scholarship, not default scholarship. That understands Islamic law and the vastness of it, and understands our situations here in the United States, and then know how to apply the rules to our situation. You don't need to start a new madhab to do that. It's available within the established madhab, schools of thought that we have. You don't need a madhab to do that. I mean, a new madhab. You need to understand the madhabs we have. And we need to understand the principles of each of the madhahib, of the schools, and the foundations of al-fiqh, usul al-fiqh, and the objectives of the sacred law. Combine all of that to tackle our situations. That's all that's required. But unfortunately, we don't have many people who are at that level of education, of expertise. And we need to work on it. It's not simple. You can't go to the Islamic University in 4 and 6 years and be able to do that. No, it will never happen. This is a person who has been engrossed in Islamic law and its related sciences. I would say for a minimum of 20 years. For a minimum of 20 years. Because he's going to have vast studies and vast exposure, right? And then he's going to have to be trained in how to issue legal judgments. Do y'all understand what I'm saying? We need someone equivalent, if you wanted to say equivalent so you can have an idea. We need someone in our community who sits on the Supreme Court in Islamic knowledge. What does it take for a judge, besides a political appointment, but I'm talking about what they do before they get that political appointment, before they're nominated to be on the Supreme Court? What type of work have they done in the field of law, in their studies, in their practice, to get on the Supreme Court or to be a federal circuit judge, right? We need those kind of scholars. And in Islam, it's much more. But we need them in our community. Why? Because when they're not from our community, unfortunately, they're not concerned about our matters like they should be, like we need them to be. They're not. So even the questions, when they're given, the answers are given, they're not given in consideration of the entire situation. So answers are given to us that are not well researched. And they don't take into consideration strictness and dispensation and circumstance and ability. All of that plays a role in giving a legal judgment. It plays a role in giving a legal judgment. But that's a job we have to work to. But sometimes we don't realize how much work we got to do. Right? We have a lot of work to do as a community, as a people. A whole lot. Remember, I was talking the other day, and it may have sounded offensive, but I wasn't being offensive. And I wasn't picking on my Maliki brothers or sisters. I wasn't. when I mentioned you have some people who claim to be Maliki and haven't studied the Maliki school, yet they are walking around, going around, talking about this is Maliki fiqh, and it has nothing to do with Maliki fiqh at all. Not reliable books, not reliable structure of learning, none of that. Has absolutely nothing to do with traditional Maliki fiqh. Y'all remember I mentioned that yesterday? Or day before yesterday? I don't know when I said it. Earlier this week. I wasn't being offensive. I was just being honest. Because people are being tricked. They don't know. Right? They're being tricked. So the people are talking about something that they're not doing. False salesmen. They could do it. They could go learn, and they could learn properly, and then they could spread what they learn, and they should do that. But that's not what they're doing. They're doing the opposite, right? So that's problematic. Whether it is Maliki, Hanafi, Shafi, Hanbali, the same stuff. There is a system, and you need to be within the system. If you're outside the system, then just say, I'm doing my own thing. Don't attribute it to something that it doesn't represent, right? There are classical books. There's a traditional way of learning, and a traditional way of teaching. There is a methodology that is established all over the world. If we go against it, then we're mistaken. That's it, right? We're mistaken. And we should get on the right path and do the right thing. And I want to share something, to be completely honest with you. Many of us have got the title Imam by default, not by qualification. Put that in the box, please. Someone write that. Many of us in our communities got the title Imam by default, not by qualifications. No, this is important that you understand that, right? It's a natural outcome of our situation. It's not bad, but we got to realize that's the case. How do most of us become imams in our communities? We're usually the one who apparently has the most knowledge, even if we don't have a lot of knowledge. So we're a group of Muslims. We come together. We get us a building. And then we have to have someone to lead the prayer. We have to someone to give the speeches and give classes or whatever. We're trying to learn. So you seem to be the most knowledge. You're the imam. That's it. There is no uh, requirements of learning and experience. There is no test. There is no examination. And then you go to work. That's most of the places in our communities. That's how it is. right? So naturally, that person, he has to step up. We have to do it. We have to pray. We want to have Jumu'ah. We're going to have Eid. So you got to do the best he can. That's it. He has to do the best he can. He has no choice. Right? But there has to come the point, and it is happening slowly but surely, where positions of leadership within our community are held by people who are qualified to do the job that they're placed in, right? That position, they're qualified. And then we have to determine what is that qualification, what is needed, what requisite information and knowledge and training does that person need to do this job? What does it require, right? I'm talking about within our communities. Imam, teacher, right? So that's development, right? It's something that's development, right? So that's why I said I wasn't putting anyone down. I'm just talking the reality of a situation that could be dangerous, right? And we have to develop that. But the problem is, one of our problems is that we don't realize how important that is because of the devaluing of Islamic knowledge, right? That relates to us not understanding the greatness of this religion and its importance. So if a person's a religious scholar, we don't value that. We are willing to settle for anything in our religion, but if it was our worldly matters, we wouldn't do that. We wouldn't do it. We wouldn't send our brand new car to Hector around the corner. We want to make sure it go to the shop. We're not going to let anyone come in and do work on our brand new home. Or if we're having surgery, we're not going to anyone to do the surgery. We're going to look for a qualified, good doctor. We have to build that up. It doesn't exist as a norm in our communities, right? But we got to deal with what we have to deal with. We got to start somewhere. We're an evolving people in Islam. We're an evolving community in Islam. And we can't keep passing the ball to someone outside of our community to handle our own problems. We can't keep doing that because that doesn't work either. Where someone from outside comes in your community and say, y'all not qualified, let me be in charge. So I can take all your resources and leave you in the same position you always been. No, we have to take it step by step. And we may not see it in our lifetime. That's fine. So long as we're planting the seed, right? We've started. I know several of our people that have graduated from prestigious Islamic universities. They're graduates from our community. That's a start. They're not capable of doing the job we need because education has dropped altogether all around the world, right? Islamic education became like Western education. After 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, the person study, he still is ill-equipped to do the job. But it's a start. It's better than where we were, right? And then we got to go further. So those people who have learned, they got to do more effort, and they need to be free just to study. And that's why when we be talking about money, people be like, oh, here they saying money. Nah, if you're serious, you need money. If you're ever going to do what we're talking about doing, you need money because you have to free people to do it. It can't do anything else. Their whole life, males and females, have to be studying. Somebody has to be dedicated to this affair. Can't do anything else. You can't go work for Mr. Charlie. We don't have time for that. You need 8, 12 hours a day studying, researching, memorizing. That's what it takes. If we're serious, or we're going to be 50 years from now having the same conversation if we don't get serious, right? And then some of us got to realize when it's our time to step aside. That's another problem with these titles. Because sometimes I wonder, do we copy that? Please, everyone copy that point. That's across the board. And anything you're serious about establishing, that's a reality. That's a reality. We should get this in our mind. That's beautiful. Beautifully put. That is so important to understand. I was talking to the barber. We had barbershop conversations the other day. My buddy JC, CJ the barber. And right, he was talking about his skill in cutting hair. But he went to school, he studied, he was teaching, he did a lot. And he was talking about his level of expertise. Just being a barber, hairstylist, right? That's just for beauty. What about for paradise? If he had to go into all that just to learn to beautify the physical, haircut, some hairstyling, he cuts all kinds of hair, right? All kinds of styles. What about our hereafter and our religious law that governs our life, right? Because religious law governs your life and it's determining your end in the hereafter. Doesn't it require expertise? Yes, it does. So sometimes being imam or elder in the community, we may not have those qualifications, and we need to be humble enough to say, I don't have those qualifications. And when we have people that have a little bit more qualifications than we do, we need to put them in a position to use their expertise for the benefit of our community. Doesn't mean they have to be the leader. That's another thing we should keep in mind. Everybody has a role to play, right? Everyone has a role to play. Let everyone play their proper role. If we're building communities, we have to understand that. But we cannot go without expertise. We cannot forego that. La- I remember 40 years ago, the level of learning in my area. And it's a sad thing to say is that I'm talking about in our community, in the Black African American community, 40 years ago. And I see today the same thing that was happening 40 years ago in our communities. The same selection. We can't continue like that, right? Even when they have people who have did some steps to qualify themselves, the elders still want to hold on to the reins of power, knowing they're not qualified, even to do the very basic things, right? I see it, right? I'm talking about religious practice. You still don't even know the rules of prayer yet. And this is 40 years. You still don't know how to properly pray, but you want to lead. So we have to overcome that, let alone in you making judgments in people's lives. You're making legal rulings in the lives of people because you're Imam. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. So that's a work that we have to do, right? We have to get our mind all around the country. And then we have to identify those talented people among us, and facilitate for them to become experts, to become people who are qualified to provide the services that we need religiously, just like we do it in the worldly aspect. And we need people that's for that. When we're talking about community, it's not just learn religion. We need people that's learning religion, and we need people who are experts in the secular sciences that we need within our community. We need both, right? And both are of equal importance in terms of our on-the-ground reality. We can't dismiss one or the other, right? And communities are doing it. There are some communities that are excellent and better than others. So I'm not saying it's hopeless for us. I'm just reminding us of our responsibility as a community, what we need to do. It's important. It's not something we can overlook. And when you travel around the country, and I travel around the country, I see that this is important. It's an important thing that we're not paying attention to. Enough attention is not being paid to it. Enough, not enough attention is being paid to this issue. And because of it, we're on a steady decline. We're on a steady decline. So we must change the direction. We're learning becomes important. And for those who don't have the ability, to help those who do have the ability, so that they would come back and serve us and our communities. And there's going to have to come a time that we don't send our children overseas except for graduate studies. You heard that? There needs to come a time where we don't send our children overseas except for graduate studies. That means that we have within our community the capacity to build our own religious Islamic educational institutions. And when we send children overseas to study, they're already proficient in the areas of study. They're going for more qualifications and higher studies. They already have the foundational things done. They already have books memorized. They already know Arabic. All that stuff is done. They've already memorized Quran. They have all that. All they're going now for specialization. That's it. When they leave the shores of America, they're already scholarly. When they leave, they're scholarly. They've already did the work. Now it's just specialization. So that means what? We got to start young. We got to start young. And we have to have institutions. And we have to see that that's all around the country, not one or two or three or four. I'm talking about our institutions all the way around the country. All around the country. You go to almost any major city, there is an African-American Islamic school that is excellent in their curriculum, in their studies, and what they produce. It should exist. It doesn't exist right now. We have to work toward it. And sometimes that may start in small circles in the masjid or small circles in the house, circles of learning in the masjid, circles of learning in the house, where we start learning. You're learning this book and then this book, and then you're learning this field. You got subjects of study, and it's serious. We can do it. It's not above us. It may take time. It is something that's foreign to us at this stage, but it's achievable. Everyone around the world has done it. Every culture around the world has done it. We're just lagging behind. Every culture has done this. I was watching a video yesterday in one of the Russian countries, Kyrgyzstan or Dagestan or one of them, right? They're producing like major books in Shafi'i fiqh, major books, manuscripts, and putting them out. And I would just see, I was like, these are Russians. And they were having a big gathering and they brought the book out and they unveiled it. And I'm saying to myself, these people have been through communism and all kinds of oppression, and now they're thriving. They're still going at it. And they're producing books that the Arabs can't produce. Think about that. They're producing scholarly works that the Arabs don't produce. They rolling, right? It's doable. And we got to take the approach of the old grandparents who couldn't read and write and worked hard so their children became doctors and lawyers and engineers and business people, but yet the elder couldn't read and write, but they understood what was needed to build, and they pushed their children to excellence. Some of us will have to be like that Islamically. I didn't have what it takes, but I helped get it done, right? And we need to make these environments, because let me tell you what happens, and I see it happening a lot. If we don't produce the environment, even when the kid or the youngster goes overseas, studies, graduates, they come back and they don't find a welcoming place. So they go dunya. This is the scary part. I've seen it a lot. The person would go overseas and study, finish, graduate, so they're at a level. When they come back, there's nothing for them. So they go to dunya and it gets wasted. I see that a lot. Because we didn't do our part. We didn't build sustainable institutions. So now when they come back, there's nothing to do. They went and learned, and it's the status quo. Can't, there's nothing for you. We have to change that, right? So these are some points that I think are very important, extremely important. And we're starting, unfortunately, at ground level. Even though we've had Islam for so many, I'm telling you, we did a lot of work in just being Muslim. And may Allah reward those who came before us in our communities who did the work that we could be where we're at today. May Allah reward them and increase them. And we shouldn't let those efforts go to waste by not being as energetic and diligent as they was at their level. We have to step it up a notch. Right? We have to step it up. We have to go to the next level. And let's see a better future for us. Seriously. I'm talking about as a community, as an African American community, and working with others, because we are an ummah. But you can't, as they say on the plane, put your mask on before the other one. Secure your mask. You can't help nobody else if you all jacked up, right? You have to first preserve yourself, and then you can help others. You're equipped to do that once you've secured your own. And we haven't successfully cured our own, or secured our own, excuse me. We got work to do. And let us realize the depth of the work we have to do. And step by step, we don't got to lose our hair to do it, but step by step, inshallah, right? But the first step is realizing that we have to take some steps because some of us think we good. It's all right. No, it's not. We got a lot to go. We have a long way to go. And that journey ahead of us should be an encouragement for us, to put more effort, because we know it's a long journey. So put our effort towards it. Tayyib, today is Monday. Inshallah, what time is 8 o'clock, I think. tonight at 8 o'clock discussing our deen with Sheikh Walid Rifai. Inshallah, we'll continue uh, with that. May Allah make it easy. May Allah facilitate. So I remind you, next week, I think everyone by the weekend should have the book so we can start going into this text, because I wanted to make it available for new Muslims and for those who, so we're going to go through different books throughout this year. And this is the first one that we're going to start, in addition to what we're already doing with the Ihya. Uh, so for those who are looking for the book, here's the link. But all your books have went out. There are maybe 2 books here that I got to send out. And inshallah, we'll get busy. If there's any quick questions about what I covered, please feel free to ask. I know I've been rushing, not taking your questions. So if you have brief questions about what I talked about, or whatever else I might can help you with, if I can, before we close out. Allah. Oh, I want to thank all of you for constantly attending. May Allah reward you. Please, as you learn and you benefit, spread the knowledge yourself, right? That is one of the ways we'll change it, by everyone teaching what they learned, right? And sharing it with your loved ones and your friends, and keep it going. Allah. So no questions. Good. All right. Barakallahu fikum. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. No problem, Miss Joanne. We're doing our best. May Allah make it of benefit. We appreciate your presence. You are a motivation, at least for me. And a few of you, y'all, my elders. And I really uh, I look up to y'all, seriously. It shows a great spirit to do what y'all doing, a humble spirit to keep going, despite being our parents. Y'all still going. May Allah reward you greatly. And all of those who are similar. Inshallah ta'ala. Tayyip, make dua for all of those who are sick. Oh, please, let us make dua for our reader. Inshallah, that Allah restores her to health soon. Let us recite Al-Fatiha for her. Al-Fatiha. All right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.